All right, let's take stock of where we are here in Hebrews, or in Judges chapter 4. In the beginning of the book, if you remember, Israel is going into the land, and they are conquering particular parts of the land. The entire nation had gone in, and they had conquered Jericho and several places. Now each tribe was going out to conquer its own inheritance. And initially, some of the tribes had success, particularly Judah. They start routing the enemy, they start pushing them out, but then they run into some problems, they run into some compromise, and they get beat. And then we saw that whole line of tribe after tribe. They could not, even though God had promised that they could. And we found out that there was a great compromise that had come in among the tribes of Israel. We saw there in the first part that segue to tribal conquest. And we saw as they failed, the spirals of sin and salvation. And this is where we are today. Salvation. God steps in and helps them. They fall into sin and fall away from God. Then they fall into slavery. They cry out to God with supplication. And then God saves them again. The last part of the book, from chapter 17 on, is going to be that picture of anarchy that is going on. But here we are seeing again this spiral of sin, another cycle of sin, to where Israel is in bondage again. If you remember, last time we saw, God had mercy on them. 3 different times they had fallen into this sin spiral, this sin cycle again, and God had raised up a deliverer for them. He raised up Othniel, first of all. Then he raised up Ehud. Ehud was the cunning one, remember, who went in, not secretly, but went in with the plan to assassinate the leader who was so cruelly reigning over them. Then we saw Shamgar, the guy with the ox goad, who slays 600 men and delivers Israel. And Othniel, when you look at him, he was the one who was the descendant, or he was related to Caleb. He was a courageous man. We already seen that in chapter 1. He kind of makes sense. But Ehud and Shamgar, they didn't make sense. They were a little bit of a surprise. So here we are again, chapter 4, verse 1. What happens? The people have done evil in the sight of the Lord again. So now that we're in this sin spiral pattern again, and we see that pattern holds true, what are we going to see? We're going to see the Lord raise up a rescuer and a judge, right? A single person who's going to come and deliver Israel. Surprise! God is going to work in a way that you don't expect Him to work. Here's the drum that the text is going to beat over and over again as we go through the book of Judges, and it's this: that God's deliverance is always timely, but it's often surprising. And it's it's always in a way that is going to bring maximum glory to Him. Let's look at the situation and what's going on here in Judges 4. First of all, we see that our sin leads to hopelessness. You see it right there in verses 1 through 3. Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud died. God sold them again into another evil king's hands. This is Jabin, the king of Canaan. And look at what it says. They are in a desperate situation. They have no hope of beating this guy. Israel has been disarmed. You get the idea they've been disarmed because you got Shamgar out there using an ox goad to beat people. Ehud had to make his own sword to win his battle, to beat Eglon. And so they are disarmed, and all of a sudden you've got this king who has 900 chariots. You would think, as these people go into this sin cycle again, that they would learn. But here's the thing that we need to understand about sin. It's this: that sin makes you stupid, and it's awful easy to get stuck on stupid when you abandon the Lord. And that's what's going on here. And the result of this is their enemy again is reigning over them. Now, like we saw last time, and like we're going to see every time, God in His mercy and deliverance sometimes will go through discipline first before He delivers His people. What do you notice about this? First of all, there are these 900 iron chariots. This is more impossible than what Othniel and Ehud and Shamgar faced. Not only that, notice what the scripture says. It says that it was 20 years. The first time it was 8 with Othniel. The next time it was 18 with Ehud, that they were being dominated and that they were in this bondage. And now it's 20 years. Like, things are getting worse, more hopeless and more desperate as God's people turn their backs on him. And not only that, it says that they were cruelly oppressed. The hopelessness of this situation just I cannot be minimized. How in the world does Israel get out of this pickle? Will they cry out to the Lord again? Verse 3, then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help. Now, I want you to think about this for just a moment. Surely, this is the 4th time that we've seen this book. Surely God is tired of this now. He saved their ungrateful hides throughout the Exodus. How many times? They come into the land. They keep turning their backs on him. And he's raised up 3 rescuers so far, and they foolishly go back to their sin like a dog to its vomit, as the book of Proverbs says. Yet, as we see later in Lamentations, when Israel has once again abandoned God and now they're in captivity, carried off into another country because of their disobedience, we see the prophet Jeremiah saying that the Lord's mercies are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. It's just really a head scratcher sometimes that God would keep putting up with these people and keep showing them mercy. And it is so easy for me to look down my nose at them and say, I can't believe you keep doing that, until I realize the depth of my own sin, and you realize the depth of your own sin, and realize that if God hadn't been patient with them, he probably wouldn't be patient with me, and he's probably showed me a lot more compassion and mercy than he's shown them, because his mercies are new for me every morning, just like they are for you every morning. His faithfulness isn't rooted in our goodness. His faithfulness isn't rooted in our worthiness. It's rooted in his love and his nature and his character. So, here we go. Israel, they've cried out to the Lord. God is going to bring along another courageous, strapping man who is either courageous like Othniel or cunning like Ehud or normal, but basically an ox-goad ninja like Shamgar, right? This is what God's going to do here, right? Someone like, y'all probably saw the guy who got the Medal of Honor the other day in the State of the Union, Eric Slover. I looked at that guy and I was intensely grateful for his courage, his grit, and his sacrifice, and I was also very glad that he's on my side. This is the type person that God is going to raise up here, right? Surprise! God, as he often works, doesn't call the wise according to this world, the powerful. He doesn't call those who are of noble birth. No, he uses the foolish things of this world to shame the wise of this world. And God literally puts together a motley crew here, not the band, but a motley crew to deliver Israel. And there is one purpose for this. It was so that when it was over, you knew that it wasn't them who saved God's people, that it was God alone who saved his people. Our sin leads to hopelessness, but we need to remember that hopelessness finds hope in our rescuing Lord. It doesn't matter how hopeless the situation is, we have a God who can overcome all hopelessness. When I say that God put together this motley crew, by motley it means incongruous. These people were people who were very different in appearance and character and background. But let's spend a minute thinking about the 3 people that God uses here to deliver Israel. First of all, he raised up a godly and wise woman. Verse 4, now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at the time. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the people of Israel came up to her for judgment. There's a little change in language here. The previous 3 times it said that God raised up a deliverer, but here Deborah is already judging Israel. In the word judging here, it's not exactly like the others. The others were military leaders, and they might have fulfilled this judging function, but this is more like Moses, when the people would come to him and he would give judgment on the disputes that they had, or like Solomon later on, when he would sit on his throne and people would come to him because of his wisdom. But here is Deborah. She's already in place. She's a prophetess, the scripture tells us. There are 5 of those that are mentioned in the Old Testament. 4 of them are positive: Miriam, Deborah, Huldah, and Isaiah's wife. And then there was a false prophetess named Noadiah. But she's fulfilling this prophetic function here, meaning the Lord speaks to her, and she's sitting under this palm tree. She's not a circuit judge to where she goes around to different courtrooms. It's people coming to her from all over Israel. Okay, so this is interesting. Here's Deborah. She's judging. This is the deliverer, right? She's about to go all girl boss on this and Joan of Arc this thing. That's what's going to happen here. Surprise! No, that's not the way that the Lord is working here. There's a second member of the crew. You've got a wise and godly woman, and you've got a passive but eventually faithful man. This is where we meet Barak. God tells Deborah to send for Barak, the son of Abinoam, verse 6. And she tells him, has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you to go take your men at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the people of Naphtali and the people of Zebulun? And he says, I'm going to draw out Sisera, I'm going to draw out the enemy, and the Lord is going to give this enemy into your hand. God promises that this will happen, even though they have these chariots. Even the chariots will be given into his hand. Now, here's something interesting about Barak. Barak is willing to go, but he is timid to go. Now, Barak doesn't look at Deborah and say, who do you think you are telling me this? No, he actually takes her word for it. He trusts that the Lord has spoken through her. I think her reputation precedes her at this point. Deborah's wisdom has given him confidence, but he has so much confidence in Deborah that we see a big flaw in Barak. He's a bit of a fraidy cat. He's not willing to boldly step up and fulfill his responsibility. He's not willing to trust the word of the Lord alone. As a matter of fact, in verse 8, he says, I will go if you go with me. I will not go if you don't go with me. As my kids say, oof. I need you to go with me. I don't trust God. And this is essentially what he's saying. It should have been enough for him that the Lord promised him victory. But Moses had said to the Lord at one point, I will not go up into the land unless you go with me. And it should have been enough for Barak that the Lord had said, I will go with you. Now, let me tell you, there's 2 different ways to look at this. There's some people who look at this in a positive sense, that he's saying the Lord told her, so he wants the one who was told to go along for the ride. There's a negative way to look at it. The negative way is that he was insecure and that he needed Deborah as a security blanket. Which one is it? Well, I think it's the negative. Look at what Deborah says here. Verse 8, Barak said to her, I will go if you go with me. I will go, but if you don't go, I will not go. Verse 9, she says, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless. Now, in other words, something is coming here that you're probably not going to like. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. The credit is not going to go to you. Now, let's just back up here and put ourselves in this time period, 1100 AD or 1100 BC. In this culture, for those words to be said, it would be a punch in the gut for any self-respecting man. You will not get glory. Your glory is going to go to a woman. This is, I hate to use the term judgment, but it is in a sense from God. I had a blessing for you, Barak, but you want to be all passive about it. You don't want to take my word for it, so I'm going to give your glory to someone else. I'm going to sell Sisera, just as God had done to Israel. He had sold Israel into Jabin's hand. Now he's going to sell Sisera into a woman's hands. By the way, that gives me great comfort that he controls the enemy just as much as he controls my situation. But this is a knock against Barak. He won't trust God's word alone, and he needs Deborah to come along. This is more than just a little humbling. One of my favorite movies from my childhood and honestly into my adulthood is a movie called The Sandlot. It's about baseball, and in The Sandlot, you've got the team of boys, the neighborhood boys who are playing each other, and they're playing kind of the bully team from another neighborhood. And they're on the baseball field, and they start, like boys do, 10, 12, 13-year-old boys, like they start to insult each other. And they're going back and forth. Oh, yeah, well, you do this, you do this, you do this. And finally, they lost all their creativity in dissing. And Ham, one of the guys on the team, pulls out the biggest diss you can imagine. He says, oh, yeah, you play ball like a girl. And God is almost looking at Barak here and saying, oh yeah, the battle's going to be won by a girl. The issue here is that Barak is being passive and not trusting God, but because of this, he's going to miss out on the blessing of obedience. And listen, that is what passivity does in our lives. You men in leading your families and leading in other areas, if you are passive in what God has called you to, and especially when it comes to leading your family spiritually, or if you leave it to others, you're going to miss out on the blessing of what God has called you to. Now, the good news is, wherever you are, whoever you are, whether you're a man or a woman, whatever God has called you to, our passivity ultimately doesn't limit God. It might rob us of blessing, but it doesn't rob God of His sovereignty. He can work even when we hesitate. And that's what He continues to do here. Now, the thing that you think is Deborah saying, nevertheless, your glory is going to be given to a woman. You're thinking, Deborah is the one who's going to get the glory here, right? Surprise! God is just working in all kinds of ways that we can't imagine here. Barak, we'll see the other surprise in a minute. Barak, with Deborah at his side, goes and he gathers his men, 10,000 men. And here they are, they go to the top of Mount Tabor. Now, you get to verse 11, and there's a little bit of an interlude. And you're like, what is this here for? Heber, the Kenite, had separated from the Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent as far away as the oak in Zananim, which is near Kadesh. And then it just leaves it there. Here's this group. They've been mentioned in chapter 1, by the way. These descendants of Abraham's father-in-law, and they're friendly with Israel, though this guy Heber evidently wasn't friendly with Israel. We'll find out later on that he wasn't, that he's actually friendly with Israel's enemy, Jabin, their oppressing king here. He was a nomad, and what we find out in verse 11 is that his tents are over near. He's pitched them near the place where the battle is going to form. So we see Barak here. We see, first of all, he's willing to go, but he's timid to go. But here's the other thing that we see, and this is what I love. Barak overcomes his fear, and he acts in faith. I love this. Look at where you find Barak at next. Verse 12. When Sisera was told that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, he went. He's on top of the mountain. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of where this is in Israel, here are some of the prominent mountains in Israel. You can see over there, kind of towards a little bit up from the middle, Mount Tabor, and then you see the Kishon River right there. This is where they are. It's the northern part of Israel. And here you find Barak on top of this mountain with 10,000 men. And what happens? You've got the enemy with the 900 chariots. They've assembled in the valley down near this river. It's game time. Deborah tells Barak, go. The Lord has given Sisera into your hand. And here is the key verse for the entire chapter. Look in verse 14. The Lord has given Sisera into your hand. Does not the Lord go out before you? And as you read this, boy, does he ever. The Lord helped Othniel. The Lord helped Ehud. The Lord helped Shamgar. But here, the Lord literally fights for Israel against these iron chariots. Notice two things about the victory here. First of all, timid Barak courageously fights. Imagine the scene. You've got 10,000 men, and they're charging down a mountain at you. Whatever hesitations Barak had before, he charges down that mountain in faith towards 900 chariots that they viewed as impossible to beat. That took some faith. That took some courage. It's a little bit like this stupid meme that went around last summer. I don't think women were talking about this. I think this is something that men talked about. But the question was, could 100 men beat one gorilla? And at least my friends, no, a gorilla would take care of all of them. No, the men would over. And then the big discussion was, well, who are the first 10 men who are going? Who's going to be courageous? And the others might be able to overwhelm them. It just seemed impossible in a sense. But 10,000 men versus 900 chariots, the 10,000 didn't have a chance. But Barak went down the mountain anyway. And here is the goodness of the Lord on display, because if you fast forward 1,100 years, you will find Barak mentioned again, this time in the New Testament, not in a negative light. You know where you find Barak? In Hebrews 11, where we were earlier, where it says, time would fail me to tell you of Barak, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, and obtained promises. For the past few weeks, I've struggled with Barak as I would see chapter 4, and then I remember that he's in the Hall of Faith. And so I look at this and I struggle with, how did he end up in the Hall of Faith? And it's because, like most human beings, I looked at Barak through the eyes of his failure. That's what I was focused on. And that's what we tend to do. But God ultimately saw Barak's faith. He did charge down that mountain. And thank the Lord that he doesn't remember the worst things about us, that faith, when we take hold of God and his word, is something that pleases him, and that faith is how we ultimately grab hold of Christ and his work so that our past doesn't determine how God views us. It's Christ's work that we cling to that ultimately defines our relationship with God, not our considerable failures. It's why later on, Peter, the one who's denied the Lord in a cowardly way 3 times to a servant girl, can be met by Jesus after his resurrection, and Jesus says, Peter, feed my lambs. Through the gospel, Peter was ultimately defined by his failure when he denied Christ. The second thing that we see about this victory here is that Barak charged with these men, but he didn't ultimately win the battle. Remember, Deborah said, the Lord will go out before you. The Lord will go ahead of you. So here's the picture. Barak and his company, they charge down the hill, but it is the Lord who routs Sisera. For some reason, look at verse 15. Sisera gets out of his chariot. He gets down out of his chariot and he flees away on foot. Why would you leave the safety of your iron chariot, essentially a tank? This is what this was, essentially a tank. Why would you leave that and flee away on foot? Well, when we get to chapter 5 is a song that Deborah and Barak sing after God delivers his people. And there are a few more details that we pick up in poetic form as we're in chapter 5. Look at verse 4, what it says. The Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens dropped. Yes, the clouds dropped water. Go down to verse 21. The current or the torrent of Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent of Kishon, march on my soul with might. What had happened? It seems that the Lord had dropped a torrential flood that caused the river to flash flood and to neutralize the chariots. Hey, you know what? We've seen this before. You remember Israel when they're going through the Red Sea and the chariots? I mean, they are dead to rights. It's over. God splits the sea, and here comes Pharaoh with his chariots, and God causes them to get bogged down in the bottom. He throws them in a panic, and the same language is used here where the Lord routs them, and he fights for his people. It's after that Miriam breaks out into a song praising the deliverance of the Lord. This is a great picture here of God repeating what he'd done in Exodus. He delivers his people in a miraculous way, even from chariots. They break out in the song. He delivers his people here in a miraculous way, and then we're going to see them break out into song. And this is what we learn here, church. Don't miss this. Back in chapter 1, Judah could not defeat the Canaanites. Chapter 1, verse 19. They could not defeat the Canaanites. Why? Judah could not defeat them because they had iron chariots. The problem for Judah was they had quit relying on the Lord. He was always capable of delivering them. And here it's like God comes back with an exclamation point. I really could have beaten those chariots, Judah, if you had trusted me. I really could have beaten them if you hadn't gone into the compromise of sin. When it comes to fulfilling God's mission, he is faithful to his promises as we humbly rely on him. And here, even though these chariots are there, you have Barak in faith charging down the mountain, and God's like, that's what I was waiting for. He comes in and he delivers his people. I think this is relevant to us as a church. This is where we have to be as a church. We are a people who, by God's grace, have taken some faith-filled risks the past few years. And he's fought for us. He's answered prayer. He's answered some really, really big prayers. But y'all, we can't get complacent and begin relying on our own strength. We've got to keep praying big. We've got to keep trusting him. Last Sunday night in our members meeting, we gave a financial update as far as the remodel of the new building. And back in September when we voted on that, we knew that there was about a $160,000 gap that we were either going to have to raise or the Lord provide, or worst case scenario, borrow. And it's something that we've prayed about and we relied on the Lord for. And since September, that gap has closed from $160,000 to $26,000. That is absolutely incredible. But we can't become complacent. There's more that we've got to trust the Lord for in that. And I would encourage you to keep giving, because even that $26,000, once we meet it, on the back end of that project, we had scaled some things back. Some things that we really need to do, but we're like, oh, we'll kind of we'll go with some old stuff here. But if more comes in, it will allow us to do more of what we need to do. But bigger than the financial aspect of that, listen, church, we are moving into a new phase of ministry. There is an enemy to go after with gospel hope in this town. There are going to be some hard and nerve-wracking things that we are going to face in the middle of that. There's going to be some ministry that we're going to tackle that is going to seem impossible. But we have to remember, for us to push back the darkness, the Lord has to go before us. And that will happen as we rely on Him and His strength and not ours. We can't become complacent. The work has just begun. This is the physical work to get us in position to do the big full-scale attack against the forces of darkness in our town. Now, I think it's good for us to pause here for just a moment. We've talked about Deborah, we've talked about Barak, and for us to actually talk about Deborah for just a moment. And there's a particular reason why I'm doing this. This discussion here in Judges 4, or this passage here, it's not a discussion of men's and women's roles in ministry. It's not the point of the passage. I don't even think when the author wrote this that he was thinking about, hey, 3,000 years from now, there's going to be some people in this thing called the church, and they're going to argue over what different roles people have and what roles women have in it. However, there are many who believe that women should serve in pastoral roles in the church who point to Deborah as justification for it. And so I think it's good, just because that is a common way to look at that, for us just to think about this for just a second. Here Deborah is. She is a prophetess. She's leading God's people. See? Why wouldn't the church do that? Let's just think about this with a few cautions. Deborah has done nothing wrong here. She's in God's will. God is using her. God is speaking through her. She's one of the prophetesses that were in the Old Testament. There are a few in the New Testament as well. And as we talk about this, what I'm saying here is that this has nothing to do with the worth or equality of men and women before God, because both are made in God's image with distinct and complementary roles to play in ruling creation. And both find great fulfillment in fulfilling those roles. But think about this as we look at this passage. First of all, consider that this is a short, descriptive, narrative passage from a chaotic period in Israel's history. This is just a description of something that happened. This is not a prescription that something needs to happen later on. It's just a description of what happened. And let's be honest, in Judges here, nothing is functioning the way that it should be. We get to the end of the book, and it's going to be every man is doing that which is right in his own eyes. We have to be careful about letting a description of something that happened trump God's clear, prescriptive commands, especially when we get to the New Testament and is unambiguous about the role of elders in the church and who they should be. Next thing to consider in this is that Deborah is raised up by God as a wise judge and a spiritual woman, but God doesn't call her to lead in battle. God made men to battle and to protect, and that distinction is preserved here. God isn't erasing distinctions in Judges 4, He is exemplifying them in a way that brings honor to Deborah. And even though he might be a sissy for a minute, ultimately to Barak. The other thing to notice here is that Deborah functions as a prophetess. She doesn't function as a priest. There is no Old Testament example of that happening. The priest and the pastor aren't the same, but they fulfill a similar role of authoritatively leading God's people in worship. So let's take this story for what it is. This story, y'all, is not ultimately about Deborah. This story is not ultimately about Barak. It's not about men's and women's roles. It's about God fighting for His people. Which brings us to our final surprise. The final surprise is this: a crafty but courageous woman. We've got one loose end to tie up here. Remember, Deborah had prophesied, this will not be for your glory. The Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. So cut back here to the passage, verse 17. Sisera, he's gotten out of the chariot. He's fled away on foot like a coward. He's fleeing. Then remember Heber, who's pitched his tents near this river. Heber, we find, has made league with the enemy. There was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. Heber had done that, but his wife had not. Here is a non-Jewish woman who steps in to help God's people again. Reminds me of Rahab earlier in Joshua. Her name is Jael. In verse 18, she goes out to the enemy and says, turn aside. Don't be afraid. He comes in, he asks for water and to watch out for him, and she does neither. Throwing silent little protest. She covers him with a rug. She gives him some milk. My guess is that Jael was a mom, because she knew you give somebody who's sleepy some milk, they're going to be out. She gives him some milk, and he falls into this deep sleep. Here he is, tucked in snug like a bug, all worn up from the battle, and she puts a tent peg through his head. This is some kind of woman here who's like, what could I use? A tent peg and a hammer. I don't want to see this one on the heavenly YouTube. I love the way how obvious the scripture can be sometimes. She puts the tent peg through his head and he died. Really? Yeah. She calls Barak into the tent, and the woman gets the glory for killing the enemy. And so once again, we see that God has delivered His people in a surprising way. It was a motley crew for sure. There were two women who show us the need for courageous women who aren't afraid of hardship in fulfilling the mission and who cheer on their warriors while thriving in their God-given, soul-fulfilling calling. We see a man who faltered but recovered to lead well, even as God goes out to rout the enemy. So who is the hero here? Is it Deborah? No, Deborah didn't fight. Is it Barak? No. He hesitated. He didn't get Sisera. Is it Jael? She happened to be in the right place at the right time after the Lord had already won the battle. No, this isn't any human deliverer. The glory goes to God because He's the one who rescues His people here. And this is the final thing for us to consider. Since He alone rescues, we must continually trust Him. There's one little nugget here that we can't miss. It's a detail that looks back and then it goes forward. I was listening to a podcast Ben had sent me this week. It was actually on this passage, and someone said that this is the Nike swoosh of the gospel in the Old Testament. It starts here, it goes backward, and then it goes forward. It starts here. You see the swoosh sign that I'm doing. What do they mean by that? Well, turn over to Judges 5. You get an extra detail here that you didn't get. Jael puts the tent peg through his head, we see in chapter 4. But in chapter 5, look at verse 24. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, of tent-dwelling women most blessed. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. She brought him curds in a noble's bowl. She sent her hand to the tent peg, and her right hand to the workman's mallet. She struck Sisera, she crushed his head, and she shattered and pierced his temple. Here's the swoosh. Judges 5, she crushed his head. Go back to Genesis 3, when God tells the serpent, your head is going to be crushed. You are the enemy of my people. I am going to crush your head. Genesis 3 gives us the first glimpse of the gospel's hope that a cruel oppressor would be crushed. As one person said, Jael's actions foreshadow the Messiah who would crush not just the head of a commander, but the head of Satan himself. And that's the biggest thing that we have to remember in this passage, is that our hope ultimately isn't in ourselves. They were looking forward to another head crusher, but we're looking back on the great victory that he won when the seed of the woman came and crushed the head of the serpent. It was Jesus, born of a virgin, who was God in the flesh, who himself was never captured by sin. It was Jesus who died on the cross as a substitute for sinners and then rose from the dead, defeating Satan's grip that he had had on death and hell. As Colossians 2 says, and you who are dead in your trespasses and in the uncircumcision of your flesh, God made alive together with him, having forgiven us our trespasses by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands. This he set aside, nailing it to the cross. He disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them in him. Listen, it's possible that you are here today and that you're being cruelly oppressed by Satan because sin enslaves. It's possible you're being cruelly oppressed by Satan because sin separates us from God. It's possible that you're being cruelly oppressed by Satan because sin is what ultimately brings death, and sin is what robs us of hope. And if you're sitting here today and you feel full of despair, separated from God, you've never trusted Christ and his work for you, that can be remedied because he came to forgive sin. He came to defeat death. He came to bring us back to God. He came to give us hope in the gospel. And so just as Israel was entirely hopeless in their situation and God went before them to rescue them, I don't care what your situation is, how deep you are in your sin, how far you feel from God, God has gone ahead of you in the person of Jesus Christ to give you victory and forgiveness and hope if you will put your trust in him. Trust him and him alone for your salvation. Turn from doing it your way and thinking that you can earn it or that you can fix this mess yourself, because you can't. And even if you can fix the mess that's going on right now in your life, listen to me, you can't fix the mess that you're facing for eternity, eternal separation from God in that awful place called hell. You can't fix that, but he can. Put your faith and trust in him. And there, brothers and sisters in Christ, here's the question. Are we going to be Israel in chapter 1? Not walking according to God's power and victory, unable to defeat the impossible iron chariots because of spiritual compromise, because we're living like those who are around us? Or, church, will we be Israel in chapter 4, walking humbly, confessing our need, even as we charge down the hill towards the impossible iron chariots, trusting the Lord to go out before us? I thought it would be fitting for us to just close this by reading chapter 5, this Song of Victory. You don't want me to preach another sermon on it. It would be redundant. But to read this and give God glory for his work among his people, follow along as I read chapter 5, verse 1. Then sang Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, on that day, that the leaders took the lead in Israel, that the people offered themselves willingly. Bless the Lord. Hear, O kings, give ear, O princes, to the Lord I will sing. I will make melody to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled and the heavens dropped. Yes, the clouds dropped water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, even Sinai before the Lord, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, the son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were abandoned, and the travelers kept to the byways. The villagers ceased in Israel. They ceased until I arose. I, Deborah, arose as a mother in Israel. When new gods were chosen, then war was in the gates. Was shield or spear to be seen among the 40,000 in Israel? My heart goes out to the commanders of Israel who offered themselves willingly among the people. Bless the Lord. Tell of it, you who ride on white donkeys, you who sit on rich carpets, and you who walk by the way, to the sound of musicians at the watering places. There they repeat the righteous triumphs of the Lord, the righteous triumphs of his villagers in Israel. Then go down to the gates, or then down to the gates march the people of the Lord. Awake, Deborah, awake, awake, break out in song. Arise, Barak, lead away your captives, O son of Abinoam. Then down marched the remnant of the noble. The people of the Lord marched down for me against the mighty. From Ephraim, their root, they marched down into the valley, following you, Benjamin, with your kinsmen. From Machir marched down the commanders. From Zebulun, those who bear the lieutenant's staff. The princes of Issachar came with Deborah, and Issachar, faithful to Barak. Into the valley they rushed at his heels. Among the clans of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. Why did you sit still among the sheepfolds to hear the whistling for the flocks? Among the clans of Reuben, there was great searchings of heart. Gilead stayed beyond the Jordan, and Dan, why did he stay with the ships? Asher sat still at the coast of the sea, staying by his landings. Zebulun, yes, they are a people who risk their lives to the death. Naphtali, too, on the heights of the field. The kings came. They fought. Then fought the kings of Canaan at Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. They got no spoils of silver. From heaven the stars fought. From their courses they fought against Sisera. The torrent of Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon, march on, my soul, with might. Then loud beat the horses' hooves with the galloping of his steeds. Curse Meroz, says the angel of the Lord. Curse its inhabitants thoroughly, because they did not come to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. Most blessed be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, of tent-dwelling women most blessed. He asked for water, and she gave him milk. She brought him curds in a noble's bowl. She sent her hand to the tent peg and her right hand to the workman's mallet. She struck Sisera. She crushed his head and shattered and pierced his temple. Between her feet he sank. He fell. He lay still. Between her feet he sank. He fell. Where he sank, there he fell, dead. Out of the window she peered. The mother of Sisera wailed through the lattice, "Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the hoofbeats of his chariots?" Her wisest princesses answer. Indeed, she answers herself. They not found and divided the spoil, a womb or two for every man, spoil of dyed materials for Sisera, spoil of dyed materials embroidered, 2 pieces of dyed work embroidered for the neck as spoil. So may all your enemies perish, O Lord, but your friends be like the sun as he rises in his might. And the land had rest for 40 years. If you don't mind, heads bowed.